Well, happy Halloween, LSU fans. I hope you had a fantastic holiday. We get to roll into the month of November. We got a lot at this Mailbag podcast where we pose questions to the board. You asked us questions. We even got a special guest question in there for Glen West specifically. We appreciate you tuning in. My name is Bryce Koon. This is also the Go 24/7 podcast, Glen West over there. Glen, I do have a question for you outside of the sphere of LSU athletics. Just told you that we're recording this on Halloween night. I did rack up on some candy by utilizing my 5-month-old daughter. Give me your top 3 Halloween candies. Like
Ooh,
when you were a kid and you dug in the bag, what are you mixing? Or what are you going to pick out?
yeah, definitely looking for those Reese's peanut butter cups. Those are got to be up at the top, towards the
Mhm.
top. I'm actually more of a peanut M&M guy.
Same.
We
Okay.
never really got many peanut M&Ms though. It was always just the tiny little bags of regular M&Ms. So I'll throw M&Ms in there, and then I'll go Snickers. I mean, I love a good little tiny little mini Snickers bar. Big chocolate guy, not really a
Yeah.
sweet tarts or gummy kind of guy. I'm definitely more of the chocolate kind of guy. What about you? What's your top three?
Well, man, we actually, it's really funny. We've got some candy outside our house, and literally 15 minutes before I hopped on the pod with you, this kid was scrounging around, and I said, well, "Hey, what you looking for?" He goes, "Kit Kats." I'm a big Kit Kat guy.
Oh, that's a good
So I was
one.
like, you
I
know
used
what?
to love looking for Kit Kats too. That's
Yeah,
a good one.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he had some Kit Kats. I'm a big Snickers fan, like you as well. And then I love a good Crunch bar, the little like kind of Rice crispy little Crunch bar. But I'm kind of like you, Glenn. I'm a chocolate guy. I'll dabble. My wife's a big like Sour Patch Kids person. Loves
Yeah.
Sour Patch Kids. So I'll divvy those up to her, and Addie can just watch us eat it. But hey, Halloween. Hope you had a good one. And as by the time you're listening to this or watching this, it's obviously November 1st, Glenn, as we get ready for the home stretch of LSU season. And like I said, we posed a plethora of we got posed a plethora of questions, but I wanted to start it out from a special guest question person over specifically to Glen West. This one comes into from myself, Bryce Koon. Is Bryce Underwood still a Tiger? Now, Glenn, I know you can't give me facts, concrete information here, but just kind of give your thoughts on the Bryce Underwood situation. I'm going to go cheesy dad joke here. It's spooky season, and I think LSU fans are getting a little spooked out by some of the news they're seeing around the message boards.
Well, I can give you some facts. Yes, in
Okay.
fact, Bryce Underwood is still a Tiger. I know that the rumor mill is swirling right now, and I know that a lot of different places have reported different things, and certainly 24/7 we have as well. What we can tell you is that Bryce Underwood is very much still very committed to LSU. I think you have to always look when you look at a situation like this and you know the hometown team's going to make a push. um, you kind of have to ask yourself though, like, what does a recruit's actions do over his words? And honestly, we have not seen Bryce Underwood either talk or kind of show any interest publicly that he's willing to entertain this. We know Michigan is offering, a pretty hefty NIL package that's similar to what LSU is offering.
Yep.
Um, if that is the case, and if that is kind of the thing that Michigan wants to get back into this thing for, I think that LSU, you have to look at this is that LSU has so much ground already made up in
Yeah.
this from the relationship side of things. If the money is even similar, I just don't see how this thing even gets off the ground for Michigan. Like I think LSU is in a really, really good spot. He's got a fantastic relationship with Joe Sloan, the offensive coordinator, with Brian Kelly, with Frank Wilson, with really everybody at LSU staff. I mean, this is a guy that's been committed now for since the very beginning of the year for 300 days. He's been an LSU to commit
Mhm.
in this 2025 class. Has really uh, done a number of kind of helping LSU build their biggest and best class that they can. And he's been on campus a number of times. He has still not been to Michigan's campus since the summer of 2023. So I just look at this from a relationship perspective, from a you can even look at it just from a purely NIL perspective. If LSU is still offering the same amount of money as Michigan, um, what is the added draw there from Michigan? I mean, Michigan
Yeah.
has not shown that they can be a program that continuously pumps out first round picks, high draft picks at the quarterback position. They had JJ McCarthy last year, um, but LSU's had Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow, arguably two of the top seasons in by a quarterback in college football history from a statistical perspective, running through here over the last 5 years, and certainly all these guys are on the offensive staff are around Jaden for 2 years. And man, even Bryce was around Jaden as a recruit. He got the chance to see up close and personal what Jaden Daniels was able to do. So I think that LSU's in a really good spot here. I think you get to this late, and then you try to, if you're another school, you try to make that last Godfather offer and see if you can't, try to change minds here. I don't get the sense that that's going to happen here. I think the one thing you just have to look out for is that if he does wind up at Michigan's campus over the next couple of weeks, then I think it's certainly something you have to consider. But so far, there has not been any indication that he's going on Michigan's campus, and he's going to be in town next week for LSU with an official visit. Official visit with a bunch of his family members. So I think LSU feels like they're in a really good spot, and there's nothing really to worry about here. And that's kind of what I echoed to our guys on our board and our subscribers this morning. Kind of wanted to put my thoughts together on it, and that's what I've been able to draw from all this.
Yeah, no, and I'll just kind of add, something small here. When I talked with Bryce Underwood during the summer when he came down for that camp, after the camp, and I think these quotes have been circulating around other, publications as well, but it was kind of a big group interview. And Underwood had said the same thing. I mean, he said, "Look, there's a reason that I committed. Being committed means something." Now, look, I understand in the day and age of college football that the idea of a commitment means so much more than it did, or so much less to a lot of fans than it did 15, 10, 5 years ago. But this does feel like a kid that, in my opinion, to your point, and we'll just kind of end it with here and move out throughout the mailbag. It feels like a kid, Glenn, that it does mean something to him to be committed to LSU. And if it was strictly about the money chase, I mean, why are we not hearing more from the direct source? Like, that to me would be the biggest thing. Like, if we're hearing some hoopla, some potential drama. Look, a lot of kids like to have fun with their recruitment. I'm not bashing that. That it is what it is. Enjoy it. Glenn, if you and I would have had the opportunity to do something, we'd probably have a little more fun with recruitment and stuff like that. But that to me just kind of stands out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I don't really have anything else to add than other what I've already said. I think LSU's in a really good spot here. Got to get through the next month, of course, but I think that the relationships that they built with the Underwood family and with Bryce, this is going to be a really, really tough and honestly a pretty surprising move if Michigan's able to pull this off.
No, I agree with you. All right, let's dive into the mailbag here. We're going to kind of go through this chronologically because we do have some questions that pertain to the now, a little bit ahead of the future, and then another sport question as well as basketball season heats up. Let's go first to B Diddy 34, who he's really wanting to know about the run game, and isn't everybody? Brian Kelly has joked about multiple times that, why don't I get questions about the run game? Obviously being facetious. B Diddy asked, do you think that they go back to running the ball out of different formations like they did at the beginning of the year instead of the Mason motion and run? Glenn, we have seen Mason Taylor motion so many times being utilized as a blocker, as a decoy. I'll start it off with you here on this one. Does LSU try to switch things up? I think that's essentially what this question's asking. Do they try to come at it in different looks, or is this run game, is it how am I trying to say this? Is it just is what it is? Like, at this point of the season, can you really do more than you've done?
I think in some respects you are who you are. I mean, this is an elite pass blocking group on the offensive line, and they've had moments there where they've really been able to open up some holes for Caden Durham in particular. And I do think that here over the next 4 weeks they are going to be facing some defensive lines, front sevens on some of these opponents that they'll be able to open up some holes and run the ball a little bit more consistently. I mean, I do think Texas A&M is probably one of the best, front. Excuse me. Oh, man.
Getting choked
one
up
of the best front sevens that LSU's faced really all year. So I think that when you look at whether it's Florida or Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, I think that they can run the ball on a lot of these fronts here down the stretch and maybe build some confidence and some momentum. But I think the bigger question here is, are they going to be able to do it against the big guys? And look, it's been a very heavy inside zone team. I mean, you see it every single week. They want to try to run between the guards and the tackles. They don't do a ton of outside runs. That was something that we had heard all offseason they were trying to implement a little bit more of. And I do think that it's just taking him a little bit of time to get this thing going. And I
Yeah.
think 2 months in here, uh, they have an identity, and I think it revolves heavily around the passing game. It revolves heavily around Garrett Nussmeier getting the ball out to his weapons, um, and really, I think just trying to complement it as best they can with the run.
Yeah.
I do think that I would like to see a little bit more Caleb Jackson. I know that he didn't get a carry against Texas A&M here last weekend, but um, he's a guy that I think just you have to find a role for him. I mean, he's a
Mhm.
north-south runner. I think if you can try to spring him loose here for a couple of big runs, he's a guy that I think could shed some tackles and maybe break into the second level a couple of times. But at the end of the day, this is going to come back to how much they can get Caden Durham involved. And I think that he's a guy that is explosive. He's fast. And he's somebody that's hard to bring down when he gets into the second level. It's just, are they going to be able to get him to the second level? So until we see it, I don't know that they're going to change things up totally schematically. I think it honestly
Yeah.
just comes down to being more physical on the line of scrimmage and getting the timing down with these guys and just continuing to work at it and see if you can't find some late season momentum here.
It's kind of funny. We came into this season thinking this was going to have to be a more run-oriented team, and oh boy, were we far off. A key thing to keep an eye on too is obviously the help of Garrett Dellinger. I mean, that's a guy too that you know if he's not a full go for next week, you're going to have Paul Mabinga. We expect to be in that spot who took over for him in that A&M game. A young player has a promising future, and we're going to talk a little bit about the offensive line for the future here in a second. But Glenn, I think that you go back and watch that A&M game, and I did, they really attacked, the interior of the offensive line between a young player in DJ Chester and another young player in Paul Mabinga. I would like to say, and I think where maybe this question's getting at, because I've seen this posed on the board over the past couple of weeks, is why don't they get under center as much? And why do they run the ball to the shotgun? And I get that. I think this is just what this group has, and people like to get upset about this type of thing when it doesn't work. It becomes very noticeable that they're not doing it. But when it has worked, we'll see. And to your point, I mean, you can make an argument, Glenn, that they've already faced the hardest defensive lines that they've faced. I mean, I'm not going to disrespect what Alabama does. I'm not naive enough to do that. But Ole Miss, South Carolina, and obviously Texas A&M. I mean, I don't know if you're going to face a harder front seven, in terms of that. It might be just as hard, but I don't think anyone's going to be more difficult in
Yeah.
that kind of case.
Yeah, and just one little added thing here. When LSU's offense has scored its most points this year, it's been when they've been able to complement the run. I mean, they
Yeah,
scored 36 against South Carolina. Caden Durham had some really nice runs in that game. Obviously, they scored 34 against Arkansas, and that was the run game was pretty consistent in that respect. So, and then when they haven't been able to quite get the run game going, they've been kind of under that 30-point mark and been struggling to kind of pull out these wins. So,
yeah.
I think it's just an LSU team right now that's trying to find itself in the run game. I think they have some competent players. I think they have talent. It's just can they get those guys working in unison and finding a way to really get this thing going in the right direction here in the last month of the year.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. Let's move over to our next question. LSU Tiger 76 says, name a coaching change that BK makes at the season's end.
Huh.
This is
You
a
want to kick
tough
this
one.
off? I might have to think about this a little bit.
I've thought about this, okay? And this is pure speculation. I want to get that out of here before I say anything. Like, there's no rumblings that we're hearing, there's nothing of that nature. I could see somebody trying to come after a Cortez Hankton again. Like in terms of a NFL team, we know, hey, you got the helmet behind me. I know LSU fans are going to kill me for it. The Falcons showed interest in Cortez Hankton. If you remember last year, whether it's another college team. So I don't know if there's going to be a forced change by BK's in terms of him making a change itself, but I could see maybe Cortez Hankton gets a look somewhere. Look, as frustrated as some people have been about Joe Sloan, some of those G5 jobs that are opening up, there might be an opportunity, for Sloan to get a call, at least an interview or something like that, a preliminary interview. So, but Glenn, maybe this is deflecting. The election's coming up. Maybe this is my best job of deflecting and being a politician. I don't know if there's going to be a physical change in on coaching staff. unless something happens here over the next 4 weeks that we don't see coming. I really like the way the defensive staff's come together. Somebody would have to get poached for you to make a change. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. I think Hankton is probably a good one just in terms of being potentially poached from another program and goes and gets the opportunity to go be a full-time OC somewhere else
True.
as opposed to being a co-OC with Sloan and not calling the plays. So I could certainly see that. I think in terms of changes, what about just additions? Like maybe
Okay,
get
yeah.
maybe get a actual special teams like coordinator in here. Like a guy that is devoted solely to special teams. I know they kind of been splitting up work with whether it's Slade Nagel. I think Bob Diaco
Yeah.
does a lot of the special teams work. Maybe promote him as a special teams coordinator kind of guy, or maybe you go out and make an outside hire. Like I think that maybe just an extra addition to the coaching staff might be where I go with that. But look, I think of course, the one game against A&M is going to be the big blimp on this, but I think by and large, and I think most fans would agree, LSU special teams has been much improved from the previous couple of years. Like
Yeah.
the A&M game certainly was a setback. It was not very good execution in the field goal game, and left at least 9 points out there from field goals. But I think you could certainly say that Xavier Thomas has made a difference in the return game. I think Aaron Burrell is pretty much automatic from a kickoff perspective. Punting with Oschendorf and Peyton Todd kind of splitting the reps. I think it's actually mostly been Peyton Todd this year when they have been punting. I
Yeah.
think he's kind of taken over that job, but he has some good ones, some bad ones, but I thought that Ramos was pretty consistent for him, before this A&M game, and I know those guys are going hard at work these next couple weeks to try to figure out what they can do to get back on track. But I will also say that the couple of field goals that they had from 48, 49 yards last week against A&M, those were career longs. They were
Yeah.
career long attempts for Ramos. So that's kind of the outskirts of his range there. I think when they get 40 and in, when they get in that 45 and in, he's proven that he can be pretty consistent. But look, he had a great game against Arkansas, and he followed it up with a dud against
Yeah.
A&M. So you hope that he can get back on track and that unit can find itself a little bit and be a little bit more consistent for him. So but special teams would be the one I think I would look at as another kind of addition for a coach if they were to make that kind of move.
Glenn and I making our best efforts for you to put us on the ballot on November the 4th. There it is. No, don't do that. That would not be a good idea.
No, thanks. I'm good.
No, I'm good. I pass. Let's go to the next question. We're going up here to Coach K7, who says, "What are your expectations for offensive line play after this year?" Now, I couldn't fit the full question on here just because of a characters limit in terms of this, but I did want to give it the full context. He said, Coach Brian Kelly says we don't have the line to run screens right now. I know that he has a type of offensive line that he likes to recruit, but Chester is the only current starter that was signed while Brent Key has, or I'm not Brent Key, Brian Kelly has been here. I wonder if the offensive line mystery next year will be a factor in Nuss's decision to go pro or not. Curious what you guys think. Keep up the great job. We appreciate that, Coach K. That was a mouthful. That's why it only fit that on there. So I'll go back to you in this one. The expectations, Glenn, we've talked about this. Like, this is why Brad Davis stacked the offensive line class last year. This is why Cohen Eccles was a late addition, because I think that there's quality, but there's some quantity in terms of how he recruits this group. But I think there has to be an expectation of LSU fans. You kind of better should enjoy the pass pro in terms of how good they are, because there's going to be a small drop off at the very least, just to the nature of what you've been able to do. Kind of your thoughts. How do you think this thing shakes up? You can give 5 starting if you want to, or just in general, how do you feel like it goes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think you have to start with what's here right now. And like you
Yeah.
look at Will Campbell, Emory Jones, Miles Frazier, Garrett Dellinger, whatever your feelings are about that group. And, I think we all, at least from a media perspective, came in thinking it was going to be one of the best in the country. And from a pass blocking perspective, I think that's certainly proven to be true. But when you bring it all together in totality, that's probably hard to make an argument for. But all those guys have been multi-year starters. They have over 30 starts together, and that's something that you're going to really miss because all of them are likely gone after this year. And that kind of
Mhm.
turnover at any position in football is really, really hard to kind of get back on track immediately the next year, and it's because they're going to be bringing in guys, whether it's developing from within who don't have a ton of experience, or bringing in the guys from the transfer portal who have never played together before. So, look, I do think that they've been very deliberate in how they've kind of built out their offensive line classes the last couple of years. I mean, they signed, I think it was 6 in
Yeah.
2024. They have 4 committed right now in 2025. So they're building for the future here. It's just a lot of these guys are just not going to have a lot of the reps, and
Yeah.
um, whether I think the question there that Coach brought up about how that affects Nussmeier is actually a pretty interesting one to think about. Um, I, I I think Nussmeier is back next year. I think with his SEC play, I think going into SEC play, it was like, okay, let's see if he can do this in SEC play and just if he can continue to put up the kind of numbers that warrant maybe a first round grade, or somebody that NFL teams think are going to be is going to be a first round pick next year.
Yeah.
I feel like he's going to need another year after watching obviously the last several weeks. He's committed a lot of turnovers here, but also just the completion percentage has gone way down, and maybe that's because LSU is just asking so much of him, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
this is a first year starter. They're putting a lot on his shoulders right now. He's learning a lot. He's soaking up a lot. And I just think an extra year here would really, really help him come back next year and be one of the premier guys in the SEC, and give LSU a chance to win next year. But you have to obviously weigh what that could potentially mean from an offensive line perspective. And if you're going to be losing 4 of those guys, you're going to have to really build that thing back up quickly. And, I like Weston Davis. I like Cohen Eccles. I like Tyree Adams. I don't know exactly what that group looks like going into next year. All I know is that it's going to be a lot of guys that are not very experienced. I mean, you could
Yeah.
have DJ Chester back, or you will have DJ Chester back, and we all know it's been not a very smooth sailing for him in his first year as a starter. He's learning a lot, and you hope that a young player like that can take these hard lessons that he's learned this year, develop as a player in the offseason, and come back much better next year. But there's just going to be a lot of inexperience on this O-line next year, whether it's guys not playing together, or if
Yeah.
it's going to be internal development for Brad Davis. So those are just kind of my thoughts on it. I think that they have been building for this, or been preparing for this for a while from a recruiting perspective. But until you get those guys out there in game scenarios, I think it's just hard to really know what the expectations are for next year if you're going to be losing so much of your starting group from this season.
I mean, I expected to take a step back in terms of pass pro. I mean, they've been borderline elite. I mean, you can make that case. We'll see. I mean, is a group that feels like and I want to say this as kindly as I can. When you talk about a new offensive line, some of the easiest things you can do is just be a mauler. You know what I mean? That doesn't take a lot of schematics understanding as pass pro does. So maybe it'll benefit LSU to be able to run the ball a little bit better. You're bringing in 2 really highly touted, freshman tailbacks. You've got guys obviously in that room that are very good. So we'll see. I will say, I remember talking with Cohen Eccles out in San Antonio at the All American game, and he had said that hey, I'm most likely going to be the backup center, but also has the ability to play the guard position. So I think there's a lot of interchangeable pieces too. England, maybe, they get through spring practice and they say, hey, we need a guy that just has 1 year, and maybe we got to go find someone in the portal that can help be a veteran leader for this team. I mean, I don't think that's completely out of the question. Look, we've seen crazier things happen. I'll be interested to see if they identify that as a need. If not, Tyree Adams might be able to fill that void in terms of a guy who doesn't have a lot of playing on the field experience, but he's been in the program for some time.
Yeah,
And
Bo
obviously he's
Bordelon.
nursing an injury. Bo Bordelon's another
Bordelon
one.
would be another one. And
Unless he
then
wants
look, I
to
mean,
keep the tight end jersey on.
yeah, look, and if you go out and you get another interior lineman out of the portal, maybe you try him out at center, you try Chester out at guard. I mean, you can do some different things this
Yeah.
offseason. I mean, Chester does not have to be plastered to that center position. It's just because, all these guys that came back this year have established roles and established positions. Like, I do think that Chester's a big offensive lineman. I think he could slide and play well at guard if he develops. But we'll see. I think there's a lot that's still up in the air about this offensive line. It's a great question, but I think it's hard to predict that far out when you've got so much overlay or overturning of that position group after this year.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. We did have someone by the name of Roban ask about 12 questions. I'm going to answer those on the message board. I appreciate the enthusiasm. But let's go to the last one here, Glenn. I don't know how well versed you are in this. I do have an answer or two in my back pocket for this one. LSU Tiger 76 comes back because obviously LSU women's basketball getting ready to tip off their regular season on Monday, I believe, and then LSU men getting ready as well next week. So let's talk about this. How do we think this LSU women's basketball team finishes? And we know about the abilities of Flau'jae, Morrow, and Michaela, who surprises us. Well, I'll kind of take a name here. Jersey Wolfenbarger is a name that for me that I'm looking at. They're going to try to play her between the 3 and the 5, and it kind of feels like wherever she can settle down and fit, it's going to make the other pieces around her kind of fall into place. So that's obviously a transfer forward who, like I said, can play the 3 to the 5, the 4 and the 5. And look, Aaliyah Del Rosario, I think they're expecting a big jump from her in her sophomore season as well. And then just kind of where do I think this team finishes? Glenn, this might be the cop out answer, but I think that this team is, I'm going to say Sweet 16, and then we're going to have to see some development, from beyond that. Like things have to click into place. Can Michaela Williams become a superstar? Can Flau'jae Johnson take another step as not just a leader for the program, but as a really great player? And then Samaya Smith. I mean, that was a player who was really going to be, I think, a big piece for them last year. Tore ACL. She's a full go. How is she coming back in terms of all these different things? And then can last year Poa, cement herself as a pivotal guard. So a lot of different questions. I know that you haven't followed them as closely as you're getting ready for the men's season, but just kind of tell me maybe your thoughts and maybe the expectations you have for this team.
Yeah, I think kind of falling in line with what you said there. I don't know that this team reaches quite the levels that maybe they have in the previous couple of years. I think they lost so much of their identity last year with Angel Reese and a lot of those players that they've kind of lost over the last couple of years. Whether
Mhm.
you even go back 2 years and you talk about the guard, what's her name? I'm blanking on her on the guard that LSU won the national championship with a couple of years ago. But for me, if we're talking about a player that I think maybe could make an impact this year that maybe not a whole lot of people are talking about. For me, it's Miracle Shepherd.
Yeah.
She was a freshman last year at Mississippi State. Averaged 5 points, 2 assists a game. Played in 35 games for Mississippi State last year, so she has a lot of experience in the SEC. And so I think that she could be somebody that maybe gets thrust into the rotation and could help out at the guard rotation there. So I think she could be somebody that really works well with LSU and could potentially be somebody that LSU counts on as a role player. But for me, I think it's going to be about the front court and just kind of what that front court depth looks like, how they rotate those minutes, because we know what we're going to get from players like Michaela and Mora and Flau'jae.
Mhm.
Those are kind of your guard / forwards there. How do they situate the bigs there? I think is going to be really interesting to watch over the first month or so of the season.
Yeah, and obviously the news that came out today, Miracle Shepherd going to be out for the first couple of weeks with a stress reaction. So that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to see how
Yeah.
they kind of want to rotate with the backcourt. We know Michaela Williams will be a part of that. Cheyenne Day Wilson will be a part of that. Um, but hey, freshman Jada Richard, and then obviously that Arizona transfer, Kaylin Gilbert, is another name to keep an eye on. So, it's a far cry.
Alexis Morris. I'm sorry, Alexis Morris. I
Yeah,
was I was blanking on your name earlier. That
that's
was that
okay.
was
She was pretty
my
good.
bad.
She was pretty good.
She
Yeah,
was pretty good. She
pretty
had
good,
a
pretty
pretty
good,
good
pretty
career.
good player. Hey, we appreciate it. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Go 24/7
We don't want
mailbag.
to we don't want to tackle one of Roban's questions. Come on.
Okay. I mean,
Is
I
it-
wasn't. Yeah. Which one do you want? Are you on the thread? Can you
I
see
am
it?
not on the thread. Let me go and look at the thread. I feel bad for Roban. I mean, we could have just pulled a couple. He did take the time to ask a whole bunch of them. So uh, let's go here.
I
Uh,
mean, there's. I'll let you tackle which question you want to go first on Ropan.
hmm. Huh. Okay. Well, why do we throw 50-50 balls to our 5'8" receiver? I think, that's a pretty standard question that you ask us and you say that's probably not the decision that I wanted to make in that situation. So you learn and you live and you learn from those experiences. So I answered one of your questions there, Roban. I think we can yeah, we'll just leave that one there. Yeah, there's a bunch of questions on there that I'm just not sure they're ones that you know,
Applicable.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, it is what it
But
is.
we'll answer them on the board for you, man. I think it's
We will.
just yeah, it's a little bit of a negative spin.
I could tell Glenn had looked at the amount of questions that he asked, but maybe not read in depth all the questions our friend Roban sent. But hey, that's okay. Look, we appreciate you. Thanks so much for getting those questions in here. And if you want to be able to ask questions for us to answer on the pod, it's a great opportunity for you to sign up over at Go 24/7. Get that VIP sub. Because look, folks, we're tracking. I mean, this is the home stretch. LSU's in a playoff push, whether you want to believe it or not. They are in a playoff push towards the end of the season. And then we are, as we hit November 1st, we're going to be just a tad over a month away from early signing day. College football never stops, I should say. Basketball season, baseball is going to be right around the corner before we know it. So a lot of great stuff for you to head over to the site and be a part of. Like I said, we got Glenn West, we got myself, and then Sonny Ship, who does a great job as well. And we'll catch you next time. Get ready for that Alabama game next week. Should be a fun one to talk about. Should be a fun atmosphere. And I want to say this: I want to challenge LSU fans: show out, show up, and show up early because Tiger fans need it. Because Glenn, after the past month of watching college football in person, I will say this: home field matters. It mattered when LSU beat Ole Miss, and I think it mattered when Texas A&M beat LSU. Yeah, teams make mistakes, but the home atmosphere, they feed off of it. So Tiger fans will have no. I don't think they'll struggle to get up for this game, night game in Death Valley. So we'll catch you next time, though, here on the Go 24/7 podcast.